Rather in the Land, Act 1, Scene 1. Prologue. The Shadowcurse enters. Its members flood the stage, moving quickly, changing directions sharply and with no visible purpose. Suddenly, they freeze. An old man appears in the middle of them. This is the Shadow Man. The curse forms a class scene. Shadow Man. To own a piece of universe is to rule a slice of sky. A grain of sand at your command. Buy yourself a dream. Instead, life is for living, not wishing for death. The Shadowman becomes the teacher. One curse member stands with a book in her hand. Begin. Act 1. Scene 1. The shop. Members of the Shadow Curse bring on a shop counter. Danny. It is really hot and the last week of school before the summer holidays. Mom and Dad were in the shop doing their usual sort of thing, serving moaning about stuff. Richard and Mary Lodge appears behind the counter. Mrs. Troy is also in the shop with her 5-year-old son. Craig is impatient to go and kicks the counter. Mrs. Troy. It's an outrage through it Mary. The price of progress love. Mrs. Troy. I hate them places. You can never find what you want and you always end up buying more than you mean to. Richard. You can do that here if you like. Mrs. Troy. I won't be flocking to no supermarket, that's for sure. Mary. That's very sweet to you, Mrs. Troy. Mrs. Troy. Pack it in. Craig, you will scuff your shoes. Have you got any peace? Big bottles, big bottled water, love. Richard. Only small ones, sorry. Mrs. Troy. They said to get big ones on the telly, just in case. Mary. It will all be over in a couple of weeks. Richard. I wouldn't be so sure. Mrs. Troy. There would not be any wars if them in charge had to go and fight in. Danny. No! Danny runs on cluttering a Game Boy. Ben follows him. You broke it, you little sod. Richard. Less of that, thank you. Ben. I didn't, it fell. Danny. Fell out of your hands, more like. Mary. I am sure it was just an accident. Danny. He's one big mistake. Richard. It's enough. Mary. You are ready for school, Ben? Ben shakes his head. Richard. I will get his stuff. You can carry that crate into the cellar. Danny. Why me? Richard. Because now shift it. Danny exits with the crate, but isn't happy about it. Craig starts kicking again. Mrs. Troy. I don't suppose you have seen old Kershaw. Have you, Mary? Mary. Not for a while. Mrs. Troy. Funny that. Oh. Craig stops kicking and starts yawning and sighing instead. There's been all sorts going on up at that farm of these dirty great lorries toing and froing till all hours. You must have heard them. Mary. It's been quiet up there for the past couple of weeks. Mrs. Troy. Preciously. Mary, I don't think some things happened to him. Do you? Mrs. Troy, who's to say? He might be perfectly fine. Pause. Then again, you could be lying dead for all you know. Mary, I hope he's alright. Mrs. Troy, come on, Craig. We can't hang over. We can't hang around here all day. See you later, Mary love. Mary kisses Ben as Craig and Mrs. Troy leave the shop. A bell tingled as they exit. Mary, you could have let her have one of the big bottles, Richard. There's enough to sink a battleship down there. Richard, 14 gallons to be exact. Then he comes back into the shop, furiously brushing himself down. Danny, any spiders on me, Mum? Mary, no, son. Danny, to the audience. I hate that sailor. Richard, might save your life one day, son. Danny, to the audience, indicating each of his parents in turn. This is my dad, the most miserable man in existence. This is my mum, she's okay. The only thing wrong with my mum is that she made my little brother. He's the squirt you just saw. Danny picks up his bag and leaves the shop. He stops just outside the door. This is Skipley, the most boring place in the known universe. Andrew enters. And this is my best mate, Andy. Andrew, no then. Danny, how's things? Andrew, rubbish as usual. Danny, Andy loves Skipley too. They started to play Conquerors. Andrew, Rhodes is doing that talk in assembly this morning. We have got him right up the first break. Doesn't get much worse than that, does it, mate? Danny, wanna bet? I have got a dirty great history test all afternoon. If there's one thing I hate more than Rhodes, it's history. They leave.